You might be chasing spiritual myths about enlightenment and spiritual awakening, which are actually very limiting beliefs that might be keeping you stuck. My name is Netjer. I'm a spiritual awakening mentor. I wanted to make this video after having helped hundreds of people in different stages of their spiritual awakening. What are the most prominent myths holding you back? Today we are going to go in depth and explore 7 different myths. They can be a subtle thought in your mind, a limited belief that you picked up from here or there, but it could be the difference between you giving yourself full permission to move forward or limiting yourself unknowingly. So let's get to them right now. Let's start with myth number 1. Spiritual awakening happens instantly. People think enlightenment is one moment where everything changes, your ego is gone, and you have completely transcended all these human qualities of your body and your personality. Everything transcended in 1 second. But that is not the case. Even though you can have an experience of Satori, which for that experience, however long that might be, sometimes a few seconds, sometimes a few hours, even days and weeks, an experience of oneness beyond the filters of your mind. During that experience, you can feel as if you have transcended everything. But remember that experiences always have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Spiritual awakening, even though it may have a lot of experiences, it's not about the experience. It's about what is not bound by time, what is not temporary, what does not begin and what does not end. Spiritual experiences can be sometimes the traps that people get stuck in. A lot of my students, including myself, I had these amazing experiences of samadhi, which took me so many years to get over. But these experiences, even though they show you what is beyond all ego and conditioning, it doesn't mean that you are now beyond the ego forever. This is a mistake I made, and my ego took that experience and said, I am so spiritual, I am better than everybody else. I now know everything and nobody can tell me I'm wrong. And this is what happens to a lot of people. And that's why there are people who are so confident in their ideas, but these ideas are still from the ego. Even though you may have had the highest experiences, it's important to know that the ego can come back again, even though in a transformed way, and there is still work to be done. There is still the integration that needs to happen. The light of the enlightenment needs to be brought into all areas of your life, and it's an endless process, really. Enlightenment is just the beginning. So it's really a myth that spiritual awakening or enlightenment is instant. Now let's go to myth number 2. Spiritual awakening is only possible for a very few rare people. Sages, saints sitting in the Himalayas meditating for years and years, or doing all these impossible tasks that no other humans can do. That is a myth too. Spiritual awakening is a simple realization of who you are. Enlightenment takes work, but it is possible for anyone who sincerely seeks it, because it is your true nature. It is who you are. It cannot be taken away from you. So it is really your birthright. Enlightenment is the only thing that is real. There is no way you can be separate from enlightenment. Especially right now, there are so many millions of beings who are awakening. Even though there is a war going on in this world, even though there's a lot of chaos, suffering, poverty, and hunger, and all sorts of things that seem misaligned with spirit, at the same time, there are millions of people who are sometimes, because of these sufferings, being led to question who they truly are, question why they are here, question what is going on in this dream, and then they start awakening. And the consciousness of humanity is shifting because of this. It's important to recognize that this is possible for you. So your ego may have this limiting belief that it's not possible for you, just because whatever reason that your ego comes up with. Just because, oh, you may not have all the knowledge, preparation, you may not know Sanskrit or all these scriptures, you may not be born in the right religion, class, creed, caste, race. None of this matters, because enlightenment is all there is. It's everywhere. It's in you. Like the Buddhists say, everything is Buddha nature. You can be enlightened in this lifetime, in this moment. If you believe that limitation, that it's not possible for you, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, my invitation to you, release that myth once and for all. And I also want to give you examples of people I have worked with. They had all this self-doubt, they had all these fears, they had all this confusion. There is some fear in terms of, this is so unknown to me, right? There is self-doubt in terms of, am I worthy of becoming enlightened? But time and again, I have seen so many beings cross that threshold. And I have myself crossed it. So from my own depth of my experience, I can with conviction tell you that it is possible for you. Myth number 3. Spiritual awakening is only blissful. Spiritual awakening is all rainbows, butterflies. That is not true. There are also times when it starts out through hardship, but many times spiritual awakening happens in such a beautiful way where you experience the light of God. You experience your own light so beautifully, and it takes you into these joyous dimensions of light. I often tell my students, life gives you a sample, like when you go to Costco and you get a little sample of that tasty little dish. When you eat it, you're like, oh my God, it's so good. But you can only have a sample, maybe 2. It's actually an invitation to commit and purchase that dish. It's time to earn it. And often, earning your spiritual awakening, which is integrating your spiritual awakening, this path may take you through all sorts of ups and downs. And some of these ups and downs can be tragic, sad, heartbreaking. At the same time, there is grace in that. Even when it's difficult, even when it's hard, even when it looks ugly, there is a deeper beauty behind what is happening. And all that is happening for you so that you can go down this path and fully discover who you are. Spiritual awakening is an invitation that doesn't stop with one or two experiences. It's an invitation to fully receive who you are, and may require you to face your demons, to face your fears. It may require you to do things which you thought were never possible for you, to push yourself out of your boundaries. Spiritual awakening in that way is a huge adventure where you don't know what's going to happen. So, spiritual awakening, I'm sorry, is not always blissful, but it gives you a taste of the bliss possible for you. Let's go to myth number 4. Spiritual awakening or enlightenment requires abandoning material success or wealth. That is simply not true. Even though there have been renunciate monks, like famously the Buddha, he was a prince. He had every sort of material wealth, the entire kingdom, so many servants, every kind of physical desire fulfilled. But he chose to leave that behind to practice all these austerities which were really hard on the body, which required complete abandonment of all physical wealth. While at the same time, there are examples of other enlightened beings, such as King Janaka, who is famous for having been an enlightened king. The main story in Astavakra Gita, where King Janaka receives instruction from sage Astavakra, and it's one of my favorite books, so maybe I'll do a video about it sometime. But King Janaka was famous for being a just, wise, kind, and wonderful king. And because of his enlightenment, he could bring that balanced ability to lead his kingdom in such a good way. I'm not saying you should become attached to material wealth, because the secret here is, even though you have material wealth, seeing that these are gifts from God to help you progress on this journey, rather than making the material path itself the end of this journey. Normally, the ego is hedonistic, trying to satisfy itself with whatever it wants and tries to push away whatever it doesn't want. So the operating system of desire and aversion is the normal state of the ego. So in order to overcome that, initially it may help when you say, I don't want any of this. But there are also other paths in which you bring the light of your awakening into the material world, into your relationships, finances, everything that you do as a human being. You enlighten all these areas of your life rather than run away from them. So spirituality is not a running away, but an embrace of life, to be able to do whatever needs to be done to be in the world and not of it, which means you can actually live your life very fully and at the same time not be affected by the ups and downs that come with life. Okay? Let your material wealth be a support for your spiritual journey. All these resources that life gives you, all this abundance, let that be also for the pathway of awakening. Or when there is difficulty, when there is a sense of nothing's working out and all that, even then see that life is doing all that for you to serve your pathway to awakening. Myth number 5. People think spiritual awakening guarantees that you have all these psychic abilities. You can read minds, travel astral realms, teleport, and move objects with your mind, even though it's possible that you are able to develop these psychic abilities, which are actually natural abilities, a lot of them. Abilities which you are born with, but you have forgotten that you even have these abilities. Like, for example, seeing people's auras and chakras. I started seeing them when I was really young. And for me, it seemed so natural that I thought everybody could see them. Because my father was a healer who saw auras and helped people with energy on a regular basis. And my mother did too. It was so natural for me to grow up seeing that this was the case with everyone. I didn't realize until I was older that most people, almost all people, had no idea what was going on. And they had no abilities to see the aura, experience energy. And there was this whole hidden world that most people could not access. So you can develop these abilities when you awaken all these filters that you have put upon yourself, which numb your senses. But as you open your mind to your spiritual awakening, you are able to experience these other realities. But at the same time, that is not why your spiritual awakening is happening, nor it is a compulsory thing that everybody who goes through spiritual awakening by default develops all these psychic abilities. Also because a lot of people get stuck because of these psychic abilities, right? It can be too much for somebody. I've had students who, because they were awakening spiritually, started being able to have some psychic seeings before they happen, or hear voices, or be able to feel different dimensions, or have intense dreams where they get messages and all that. Because they were not ready for it, or because they did not know what was happening, they were diverted from the path, misguided by these voices sometimes, or pursuing these abilities thinking that was the goal of why it's happening for them. I myself, when I did channeling and thought, oh, now I'm a channeler and this is what I do, I'm gonna, channel these beings. That's the whole reason I'm awakening. Even though that was a phase in my spiritual awakening journey, it was actually one small step, which actually showed me that I should not rely on these outside forces which I don't even know. So I learned to honor my own light. Even though these were beautiful psychic abilities, learn to use them modestly in the right way. It's important to have right etiquette. If we misuse them for our egoic purposes, what happens is that these abilities become the traps that hold us back. It can be a huge adventure as you discover these abilities, but know that it's not about all these fancy, shiny things, but it's all about your higher self, the true self. So let's move on to myth number 6. And that is, people think that awakening can happen only through understanding. Awakening is an intellectual exercise because
People are so thirsty to know. And even though it can be very helpful to have an intellectual understanding, because I myself come from the Jnana Yoga tradition of Advaita Vedanta, the path of knowledge, of non-duality, understanding that you are not separate from God. I see very often my own peers, my students, and myself actually having been stuck in intellectual concepts. I've spent so many years there because even though intellectual understanding can give you epiphanies and realizations, it does not take you all the way. It is not just about understanding and figuring it out through the headquarters. It's not just a brain exercise. You have to bring your heart into it. You have to see from a deeper place and experientially realize who you are. That is true awakening. Otherwise, you could just read a book, and everybody who reads this book is, it's done. Everything's over. And now you're enlightened and you can go home. But it's not that way. There are so many nuances that words cannot describe. So many misconceptions hidden within concepts. Right? Because all concepts have some sort of duality in them. All these intellectual ideas have limitations. So it's very, very hard, if not impossible, to convey the fullness of enlightenment through words. So that is why for generations and generations, these ancient lineages pass the deepest secret teachings through what is known as energy transmissions. This is the gift of having a teacher who is enlightened, a mentor who is enlightened, who can not only tell you things for your intellectual understanding and clear up your doubts, but also show you energetically, share their awareness with you. And this is the reason that I am here, because I received these transmissions, these empowerments from my enlightened teachers. And that's how I had my first samadhis, ones which completely changed my life. This is how my breakthroughs in enlightenment happened. Not just by thinking about it, not just by reading something about it. And most of the world is just using their intellectual capacities to argue about enlightenment and spiritual awakening all the time. People are just so attached to one dualistic aspect of a concept and believe that side to be true. Right? But that's the limitation of the mind. It can only grasp that one side. What is beyond the mind, what is beyond understanding, is a fuller expression of enlightenment, which contains all dualities, multiplicities. They can be true at the same time. It is beyond time, it is beyond space, it is beyond logic in some ways. But our ego misuses even the most beautiful spiritual truths. The ego can come in and put its own spin on it, interpret it in its own way to serve the continuation of the ego. So that is why just using intellect cannot give you the fullness of enlightenment. So I invite you to see how you can go deeper, find an enlightened teacher, find an enlightened mentor who can give you those transmissions. And don't just read about it. And this brings me to the final myth, myth number 7, which is people think you can do it alone. People think you can just go on your own individual journey and figure it out and find enlightenment, which, even though has been possible for very, very few people, people who have spontaneously awakened, people who have had enlightenment in their previous lifetimes, and in this lifetime they come back and then they're like, this is it. But even advanced souls who have done the work before, and also, of course, everybody who is an intermediate and a beginner in their spiritual awakening journey especially, it is so, so helpful, if not essential, to have an enlightened mentor for you to awaken. And that is because this world is full of all sorts of diversions, distractions, and our own ego is fighting against our own enlightenment. And it can be so confusing. It can be so hard. Even if you have the highest teachings in books, the teachings of the Buddha, the teachings of Jesus, the teachings of Muhammad, all these Sufi teachings, all these amazing mystical hidden teachings from Kemetic religion, the Kabbalah, scriptures which talk about this truth exist, but they are really hard for somebody to interpret if it's not an alive, enlightened teaching which is so relevant right now, to this day, to this age, given to you, seeing where you are. Of course, a lot of preachers say, this scripture is relevant, every bit of it, but how do you make it relevant for you? How do you really understand and receive it in this moment? There are amazing enlightened masters, even more recent ones who have passed along, like Ramana Maharshi. So many teachers that I used to read their books and I would have epiphanies and such. But at the same time, after having those epiphanies, once again my mind would go back to these attachments and go into intellectualizing these ideas and such. Right? So that's the trap. When you have an enlightened mentor, they can see where you are at. They can sense where you are at. They can understand where you are at and help you move forward. I say enlightened mentor, it's important, not just some mentor, because if the blind are leading the blind, there is no hope of finding the light. And that is how things are in this world. It's very hard to find an enlightened mentor. I was looking for 7 years before I found my first enlightened teacher with whom I had all these breakthrough experiences. I studied with him for 3 or 4 years before I knew it was time for me to find my second enlightened teacher. Then he took me forward even higher. Remember, enlightenment is just the beginning. This way that an enlightened mentor can help is so precious. I experienced how precious that is. It completely changed my life. Also, the peers, the community that was built around this path, they helped. So you cannot really do it alone, because it's as if you are stuck in the dark all by yourself with no help. But when there is an enlightened mentor and a community of people supporting you, there is so much help. And there are so many reminders. There is so much inspiration when you see others doing it. When you receive the feedback of your enlightened mentor, it changes everything. So that is the reason why after many years, when my enlightened mentor told me that it is now time for me to pay it forward, I created my own mentorship and community around it with the specific goal of helping spiritually awakening beings who are going through a disruptive awakening or dark night of the soul, who have questions, who have confusions, who are looking for guidance. And I know how it can be, because I was in this place myself, trying to do it alone. It was hopeless sometimes. I didn't know whether I was going up or down. I didn't know which way was what, going around in circles, slipping down a slippery slope. But fortunately, something in me knew I had to find my enlightened teacher, and I looked and kept on looking, and my life changed forever. So the whole reason I have dedicated my life to be a spiritual awakening mentor is because I know there are millions of people who are out there looking for help just like I was. If you are one of these beings who are awakening and looking for help, I invite you from my heart to take the first step and get an overview of what is really happening for you. Understand what are the common pitfalls and mistakes that people make. What are the possibilities that are here for you to awaken? What is the right kind of help and support you can get? So I have made a 2-hour masterclass about spiritual awakening, which goes through all this. It talks about the dark night of the soul. It talks about my own journey through it and how I came to help others. And this is available for free on my website. So just go to my website, awakenwithra.com. The link is down in the description or the first comment. And I invite you to go check it out and really take the first step to advancing beyond this being stuck. This is possible for you to awaken fully, to integrate your awakening. Remember that enlightenment is possible for you in this lifetime, and it's much easier than you think. So with that invitation, thank you so much for watching. Namaste.